China's robot army is already replacing millions of workers. You heard that right. Not planning to, not trialing it, not running a pilot program in one province. Already doing it at a scale no nation in human history has ever attempted. As of 2024, China operates over 2 million industrial robots across its factory floors, more than the United States, Japan, Germany, and South Korea combined. It installed nearly 300,000 new machines in a single year. That is more than one new robot every 2 minutes, every single day, for 365 days straight. To put that in terms that actually land, the entire operational robot workforce of the United States fits inside what China added in 12 months. This is not a manufacturing upgrade. This is a replacement. And the world has barely started paying attention. The factories that turned off the lights. Picture a factory the size of 11 football fields. No windows you need to look out of, no break room, no time clock, no shift whistle, no hum of conversation on the floor, no footsteps between stations, no human voice anywhere inside the building. Just the rhythmic precision of machines working in total darkness because the machines do not need the lights on. That factory is real. It sits in Changping, Beijing. Xiaomi built it in 2024 for $330 million. Inside, 11 fully automated production lines run around the clock, managed by a proprietary AI system called Hyper-IMP, which does not just monitor the lines, it identifies problems, solves them, and optimizes the entire process without anyone telling it to. The factory produces 10 million smartphones a year. At peak output, it finishes one device every 3 seconds. And on the production floor itself, there is not a single human worker. This is what the industry calls a dark factory. The name is literal. Robots navigate using infrared cameras, LiDAR, and machine vision. They do not need light. They do not need heat adjusted for human comfort. They do not need safety signage, emergency exits marked in green, or floor space reserved for the people who used to do this work. What they need is power, data, and time. And on all 3 counts, they never stop. You might assume this is an outlier, a headline-grabbing experiment, one eccentric company spending its way into the future while everyone else keeps doing things the normal way. But here is what makes that assumption wrong. Foxconn runs dark production lines assembling Apple devices. Jetour's facility in Fuzhou builds SUVs with near-total automation. China's electric vehicle and semiconductor plants are pouring billions into lights-out infrastructure. The dark factory is not a curiosity. It is the direction the entire country is moving. And the reason is not simply that robots are impressive. The reason is that China is running out of people. China's population shrank for the 3rd consecutive year in 2024, losing 1.39 million people. Its working-age population is on a trajectory that economists describe as a labor cliff, a structural, irreversible drop driven by decades of one-child policy and a birth rate that has not recovered. Manufacturing employed approximately 120 million Chinese workers in 2024. By the end of this century, projections show only 36% of the country will be of working age, down from nearly 60% today. The math is unambiguous. You cannot run the world's largest manufacturing economy on a shrinking human workforce. So China made a decision. It would build a robotic one instead. The numbers that followed that decision are staggering. In 2014, China installed around 57,000 industrial robots. By 2024, that number had climbed to 295,000, a 5-fold increase in a decade. China now accounts for 54% of every industrial robot installed anywhere on Earth in a given year. Its robot density, the number of machines per 10,000 manufacturing workers, sits at 470. The United States, by comparison, sits at 295. China has 5 times more operational robots than America in total. But the raw numbers only tell you the scale. What they do not tell you is what happens inside those factories once the humans leave and the lights go out. The AI does not just replicate what a worker would do, it does something a worker physically cannot. It monitors every variable on every line simultaneously, in real time, 24 hours a day. It predicts equipment failure before the failure happens. It adjusts output based on supply chain data arriving from 3 time zones away. It catches defects at a rate that human inspection, no matter how skilled, cannot match. According to the International Energy Agency, eliminating human-centric infrastructure, lighting, heating, ventilation, cuts energy consumption by 15 to 20%. But the more consequential efficiency gain is not in the electricity bill. It is in the elimination of error, downtime, and the biological limits of human attention. When Xiaomi's CEO described what his Beijing factory can do, he did not frame it as a labor story. He framed it as a capability story. The platform, he said, can identify and solve issues while improving the production process over time. The factory, in other words, gets better at its job without being told to. It learns, and it never clocks out. This is what China turned on when it turned the lights off. Not just automation, something closer to a manufacturing organism, one that grows more efficient the longer it runs, that does not fatigue. And that is now being replicated across the country at a pace the rest of the world has not begun to match. The dark factory is chapter 1, but the robots are not staying inside the building. The robot that builds your car. In Chongqing, there is a factory the size of a small city block that assembles a new car every 60 seconds. It is called the Chang'an Automobile Digital Intelligence Factory. When it opened in 2024, it became Asia's largest dark factory. Inside, over 2,000 robots and autonomous vehicles work in coordinated silence, welding, painting, bolting, and inspecting at 20% less cost than any traditional method could achieve. The humans who used to do this work are not on a different shift. They are not on a break. They are simply not there. This is what China's automotive revolution looks like at ground level. And BYD, the company that overtook Tesla to become the world's largest electric vehicle seller, built its entire rise on exactly this model. At BYD's facility in Xi'an, operations run at 97% autonomy. 1,200 welding robots handle the body assembly. The painting process is 100% automated. Autonomous guided vehicles move components between stations without a single human hand touching them. Neural networks scan battery cells in real time, catching microscopic defects in electrode alignment that no human eye could reliably detect, defects that once slipped through and shortened battery life. Since deploying these AI-driven systems, BYD cut battery defects by 40% and improved average battery lifespan by 20%. The result of all of this is a price tag that has shaken every car market on Earth. A BYD vehicle comparable to Tesla's Model 3 costs 15% less to produce than the equivalent rolling off Tesla's own Shanghai floor. BYD went from building 500,000 vehicles a year in 2017 to over 4 million in 2024. That growth did not come from hiring more workers, it came from replacing them. And this is not a BYD story, it is a China story. Nearly 1/4 of all industrial robots deployed in the global automotive sector in 2024 went into Chinese factories. China accounted for 48% of all automotive robot installations worldwide. The country is not just building cars faster. It is building the infrastructure to build cars forever, without the biological limits that every human workforce carries with it. The factory floor has been conquered, but the robots were not going to stop there. The robot that delivers to your door. Consider what it takes to deliver one package in China. The country processed over 110 billion parcels in 2022 alone. You heard that right, 110 billion. That is roughly 75 packages for every man, woman, and child living in the country in a single year. And the numbers keep climbing. The question China decided to ask was not how to hire more delivery workers to handle the volume. It was how to build a machine that never needs to be hired at all. By the end of 2024, more than 6,000 driverless delivery vehicles were operating across over 100 designated city zones in China, completing hundreds of millions of deliveries. These are not remote-controlled toys on a closed track. They are commercially deployed, permit-holding, revenue-generating autonomous machines navigating real streets, real intersections, and real weather. Meituan's autonomous fleet had completed nearly 5 million orders by that point. On Singles' Day, China's annual shopping event that dwarfs Black Friday by every measurable metric, JD Logistics deployed 700 delivery robots across its network. On that single day, robot-fulfilled orders spiked 300% compared to the year before. Inside the warehouses feeding all of this, the transformation is just as absolute. At JD's automated fulfillment center in Shanghai, 20 robots now handle what used to require 400 human workers. The system sorts up to 16,000 packages per hour at 99.99% accuracy. JD has publicly announced plans to acquire 3 million robots, 1 million unmanned vehicles, and 100,000 drones over the next 5 years. Robots in China's warehouse operations currently process up to 3 times more orders per hour than manual equivalents. What is being built here is not a faster version of the delivery network that exists today. It is a replacement of the human layer that makes that network run. The couriers, the sorters, the pickers, the loaders, one by one, the functions that define those jobs are being absorbed into systems that do not take sick days, do not need health insurance, and do not require a living wage. China has already demonstrated this works at scale. The rest of the world is watching, and some of it is very afraid of what comes next. But the replacement is not stopping at the factory or the warehouse. It is walking through the front door. The robot that looks like you. Up until recently, the robots replacing China's workers had one obvious limitation. They were fixed. A welding arm stays at its station. A warehouse sorter stays on its track. An automated guided vehicle follows a pre-mapped route. The jobs they replaced were the jobs that could be brought to them. But there was an entire category of human labor that requires something more. A body that moves, adapts, reaches, balances, and responds to an environment that changes by the second. For that, China needed a different kind of machine. It needed one that walks. In February 2025, over 1 billion people watched 16 humanoid robots perform a synchronized folk dance at China's Spring Festival Gala, the most watched television event on Earth. The robots were built by Unitree Robotics. They wore traditional floral jackets and spun red handkerchiefs in perfect unison alongside human dancers. It was not a stunt, it was a national announcement. China has entered the humanoid era, and it intends to lead it. AgiBot, founded in Shanghai in 2023 by a former Huawei engineer, produced its 1,000th general-purpose humanoid robot in January 2025. By December of that year, the company had shipped 5,000 units, placing it among the largest humanoid robot producers on Earth at a company less than 3 years old. Unitree's G1 humanoid sells for the equivalent of roughly $14,000. That price point, in a market where comparable Western systems cost 2 to 4 times as much, is not an accident. It is strategy. China's government allocated over $20 billion in subsidies to its robotics industry in late 2024 and early 2025 alone. The National Development Plan explicitly targets humanoid robots as a pillar of the country's economic future. 6 out of 11 domestic humanoid producers announced targets to manufacture over 1,000 units each in 2025. And they are already working. UBTech's Walker S1 has been deployed at BYD, Foxconn, and Dongfeng auto plants, performing assembly line tasks, the same tasks that human workers do today, on the same floors, at the same stations. Not testing, not trialing. Working. BYD, which already operates some of the most automated factories on Earth, is backing AgiBot directly. The company that replaced human painters and welders with industrial arms is now investing in robots that can do everything those arms cannot. Each new industrial robot deployed in China has historically displaced 1.6 human workers. The humanoid is not bound by the fixed station constraint that limited that math. When the robot can go wherever the work is, the calculus changes entirely. The replacement has a face now, and it is coming off the assembly line. The cost the world hasn't calculated yet. Here is the number that should keep every labor economist awake at night. Oxford Economics projects that close to 12 million Chinese manufacturing workers will be displaced by automation before 2030. 12 million people. That is more than the entire population of New York City, losing their jobs in a single decade, in a single country, in a single sector. And that projection was made before the humanoid wave, before the dark factory acceleration, before China crossed the 2 million robot threshold, before AgiBot started shipping 5,000 humanoids a year out of a factory that barely existed 2 years ago. China currently employs approximately 120 million people in manufacturing. Domestic experts estimate that automation and AI could affect up to 70% of that workforce. You do not need to do that math slowly. The scale of what is coming is not a gradual shift. It is a structural replacement of human labor at a speed no economy has ever attempted to absorb. The people inside China feel this already. The country is facing what analysts describe as a double bind: labor shortages in automated high-skill sectors running simultaneously alongside unemployment in the sectors being replaced. The robots are filling the gaps at the top of the value chain and eliminating the rungs at the bottom. The workers displaced from factory floors are not automatically becoming the technicians who maintain the robots. That transition requires time, investment, and access to education that is not evenly distributed. But here is the part that goes beyond China's borders. The cost of manufacturing in Chinese robotic factories is collapsing in real time. A BYD electric vehicle already rolls off a line 15% cheaper than the equivalent Tesla. Chinese manufacturers dominated 84.7% of the global commercial service robot market in 2024. China accounted for 2/3 of all robotics patent applications filed globally that same year. The country is not just automating its own economy. It is building the technological and manufacturing infrastructure to supply the world's automation at a price no other nation can match. When China's robot army finishes reshaping its own labor market, the disruption does not stay inside China's borders. It travels down every global supply chain, into every market where Chinese-made goods compete, and into every country that is about to discover its manufacturers can no longer afford to keep humans on the floor. The silent army is already marching. The world just hasn't heard it yet. The world that wakes up last. In September 2025, Ford Motor Company's CEO Jim Farley returned from a visit to China and said something that no executive of a 120-year-old American car company would have said lightly. He warned that if Ford loses the competitive battle with its Chinese rivals, it stands to lose everything. Not market share, not a region, everything. And the reason he gave was not software. It was not pricing strategy. It was not brand loyalty or distribution reach. It was the factories. China's automated factories, he said, had achieved comprehensive superiority. The plants where robots weld, assemble, and inspect around the clock at costs no human workforce can match. The plants that have turned the economics of manufacturing into a game where the rules were rewritten while the rest of the world was still learning the old ones. Ford is not alone in that realization. It is just one of the loudest voices to say it out loud. By early 2025, Chinese factories were producing nearly 1/3 of all manufactured goods on Earth, more than the combined output of the United States, Germany, Japan, South Korea, and Britain. One country, 1/3 of everything made. And that share is still growing, because the competitive advantages driving it do not erode over time. They compound. More robots generate more production data. More data trains better AI. Better AI enables more capable and more autonomous systems. More autonomous systems lower costs further. Lower costs price foreign competitors further out of the market. The flywheel, once spinning, accelerates on its own. A decade ago, China imported roughly 3/4 of the robots it used from foreign suppliers, mostly Japanese and European. Today, it manufactures 57% of its own industrial robots domestically. Chinese firms now hold 2/3 of all effective robotics patents filed globally. The country that once depended on other nations' machines to run its factories now builds those machines and sells them to the world at prices no established supplier can consistently undercut. Unitree's basic humanoid robots sell for $6,000 in China. Boston Dynamics, the American benchmark for advanced robotics, sells comparable systems at a multiple of that figure. The price gap is not a temporary advantage. It is a structural one, built on a decade of subsidized production, scaled supply chains, and a domestic market large enough to absorb the volume needed to drive costs down to levels that others cannot reach. Morgan Stanley projects the global humanoid robotics industry will be worth $5 trillion by 2050. Their forecast for how many humanoid units China will have deployed by that year: 302 million. The United States, 77 million. The gap they are projecting between the world's two largest economies in the single technology most likely to define what physical labor means for the rest of this century is not a gap that closes quickly. It is a gap built on decisions made years ago, infrastructure deployed at scale, and a national strategy that treated robotics not as a technology trend, but as an existential industrial priority. This is what the title of this video was really asking you about. Not a novelty, not a pilot program, not a handful of impressive factories that journalists fly in to film and call a revolution. Let's be precise about what has actually happened here. 2 million industrial robots already on the floor right now. 295,000 new machines installed in a single year, more than every other nation on Earth installed combined. Factories running in total darkness, producing 10 million smartphones annually with no human hands involved. Car plants operating at 97% autonomy. Warehouses processing 16,000 packages every hour with 4 people in the building, not to work, but to watch. Delivery robots navigating real streets, completing hundreds of millions of real orders. Humanoid machines standing on the same production lines at BYD and Foxconn, where human workers once stood, performing the same tasks, without a wage, without a break, without a limit on how long they can run. And behind all of it, a generation of companies, AgiBot, Unitree, UBTech, scaling to tens of thousands of units a year at prices the rest of the world has not found an answer to. This is not a forecast. It is not a projection based on favorable assumptions. It is a description of what is already built, already running, already shipping product into global markets. China's robot army is already replacing millions of workers. The factories are dark, the lines are moving, the machines do not know what it means to wait. The world is still deciding whether to take this seriously. China stopped deciding a long time ago.